In a forgotten valley, cloaked by towering trees and hidden from the eye of the sun, lay the village of Eldergrove. Known for its emerald fields and elven beauty, Eldergrove had flourished for centuries in quiet harmony, the trees whispering ancient secrets, and the rivers flowing with crystal-clear wisdom. Yet, a shadow had begun to creep through the heart of Eldergrove, a darkness as unnatural as it was silent. It began with the crops. One morning, the villagers woke to find the once lush fields tinged with grey, their leaves brittle and curling as though struck by frost. Then came the silence. Birds, once vibrant with song, vanished from the treetops, and the forest grew eerily still, as if every creature within had been muted by an invisible hand. A dense mist coiled between the trees, thickening each night, veiling the stars above and shrouding the village in a cold, damp shadow. The villagers turned to their elders, ancient figures draped in robes of silver for wisdom. Hushed voices shared forgotten tales and half-spoken fears. Some whispered of a curse, others of spirits angered by some unknown slight. But there was one story that seemed to haunt the villagers' minds the most. A tale of a dragon who flew across the midnight sky, trailing stardust that could light even the darkest of paths. Eryndor, a young elf with an unyielding gaze, listened as the elders spoke, their voices trembling like leaves caught in a sudden wind. Eryndor was not easily swayed by myths, yet he felt the weight of their words press upon him. If there was a creature out there who wielded the power of Stardust, perhaps it could banish this creeping darkness, restore the life seeping away from his village. He could not bear to stand idle as his home withered. That night, as the village huddled in uneasy sleep, Eryndor gathered what little he owned, a small satchel of herbs, a charm passed down through his family, and a dagger whose blade glimmered with the moonlight. The road stretched out before him, a narrow path winding through the shadows, leading into the heart of the Obsidian Mountains, where few dared tread. The journey was lonely, the silence oppressive. The mist seemed to part reluctantly as he walked, curling behind him, as if it sought to close off his path home. His steps were light, but his heart felt heavy, weighed down by the fate of his village and the uncertainty that lay ahead. The further he travelled, the more he sensed a presence in the air, a quiet, watchful energy that seemed to follow him. He moved through forests where the trees were twisted, their branches gnarled and grasping like the hands of forgotten spirits. Strange shadows flickered at the edge of his vision, darting between trees and vanishing before he could look upon them fully. At times, he felt as though the ground beneath him pulsed, like the quiet heartbeat of the earth itself. In the valleys and over rivers, he moved as if in a waking dream, each step taking him further from the familiar and closer to a world where mystery and magic were woven into every shadow and whisper. As the days passed, the village began to fade from his mind, replaced by a singular vision. A great dragon, wings stretched wide across the midnight sky, breathing stardust upon the world below. The legend told of a dragon named Ash, whose very breath held the power to ignite the night. Only those brave enough to seek him out, to venture into the mountains under a veil of night, could hope to find him. And yet, the stories warned that the dragon's gifts came at a price, a toll that could not be paid in gold or silver, but in something far more precious. Eryndor knew he was reaching the end of his journey when the landscape grew darker, the mist thickening like a shroud as the Obsidian Mountains loomed ahead. Their peaks were sharp, piercing the sky like jagged teeth, and an eerie stillness hung over them, as if even the wind dared not disturb their silence. He took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the unknown settle around him, and pressed onward, his thoughts quiet, his steps steady. As dusk fell, the mountains cast long shadows, filling the valley with an impenetrable darkness. He climbed higher, the path narrowing beneath his feet, his heart quickening as the air grew colder, sharper, as though infused with fragments of ice. Just as the stars began to prick through the dark sky, he paused, feeling the ground tremble faintly beneath him, like the first hint of a heartbeat. And then he saw it, a glimmer on the horizon, faint but unmistakable. A silvery light traced the edge of the mountain, curling upward like smoke, only to dissolve into stardust that lingered in the night air. His breath caught, and for a moment all fear fled from him, replaced by a fierce, unshakable resolve. Somewhere in the darkness ahead, Ash, the midnight dragon, awaited him. Eryndor's steps fell silent as he ventured deeper into the shadowed heart of the Obsidian Mountains, where even the air seemed to hold its breath. The faint trails of stardust he had glimpsed lingered in his mind, a whisper of silver in the vast consuming blackness. He followed the traces left by that elusive shimmer, winding through narrow passes and climbing crumbling stone ledges that seemed to have stood undisturbed for centuries. As night fell fully, the world seemed to hold itself still, and the sky stretched out above him, an infinite canvas of starlight. Yet, unlike the warm glow of his village's evening fires, this light felt ancient, distant, and cold, a reminder that he was no longer in a place where mortal beings held dominion. Then he felt it, a deep, thrumming energy that hummed through the air and vibrated in his very bones. He stilled, catching his breath, and realized that the mountain itself seemed alive, an ancient beast resting in the heart of the night. Somewhere, beyond the cloak of darkness, he sensed a presence waiting, as patient as the stones themselves. He knew he was close, Through a narrow gorge shrouded in mist, he walked as if drawn by an invisible force. The passage opened into a vast cavern, its ceiling disappearing into shadows above. In the center, resting upon a rocky throne, was the dragon. Ash was unlike anything Eryndor had ever imagined. The creature's scales were dark as polished onyx, glistening like the night sky just before dawn. But his eyes, two embers burning with an intense unearthly fire, held an intelligence far beyond anything mortal. Flecks of stardust clung to his form, drifting slowly around him like faintly glowing ash, casting a pale silvery glow upon the stone. For a moment, Eryndor could do nothing but stare, caught between awe and terror. The dragon's presence was overwhelming, his power palpable. Here was a being born from ancient mysteries, a creature who had flown through the night long before the first elf had drawn breath. Finally, Eryndor found his voice. "Ash, dragon of midnight, I seek your help." The dragon's eyes fixed upon him, piercing and unreadable. His voice, when it came, was like distant thunder, low and resonant, each word rippling through the cavern's stone walls. "You come to ask? Yet you do not know what it is you request," Ash said, his tone neither welcoming nor hostile. Eryndor swallowed, feeling his courage waver. "My village is drowning in shadow. The crops die, the animals have fled, and a mist shrouds our homes. The elders say only the stardust of a midnight dragon can lift this curse. I came to seek your aid." Ash tilted his head slightly, a glimmer of something unfathomable in his gaze. "You speak of a curse as if it were something that exists outside yourself, but curses are often born from within. Shadows feed on doubt and fear, on the mistrust buried in silent hearts." Eryndor felt a chill pass over him, for he had sensed the unspoken fears in his village, the whispers in darkened rooms, the questions that lingered just out of reach. And yet, he had never imagined that such fears could summon a darkness capable of swallowing their world whole. The dragon shifted, the movement causing stardust to drift into the air like scattered embers. "You seek my stardust, elf, but my magic is no simple thing, no light to be borrowed and returned. If I were to lend my aid, there is a price, a toll that goes beyond mere courage. Are you prepared to pay it?" Eryndor took a trembling breath, his resolve wavering under the weight of those fiery eyes. "If it means saving my village, then yes, I am prepared." The dragon's gaze held him, as if measuring the truth in his words. After a moment, Ash gave a slow nod. "Then you shall have your trial. But understand this. Trust and sacrifice are entwined like night and starlight. One cannot exist without the other." A sense of dread prickled along Eryndor's spine. He had expected bravery to be the test, a display of valor to prove his worth. But this trial felt far more ominous, something that lurked at the edges of his understanding. Ash rose, his wings stretching wide, casting shadows across the cavern like the spread of night itself. To lift the darkness, you must join me on my midnight flight. Only those who ride upon the wings of a dragon know the truth of the night, the meaning of trust. If you survive the journey, then you will have my help. Eryndor felt the weight of the dragon's words settle upon him. There was no promise of return, no reassurance in Ash's eyes. This was a journey of faith, of surrendering himself to something ancient and unfathomable. And yet, despite the fear tightening his chest, Eryndor nodded. He stepped forward, reaching up as Ash lowered one colossal wing, offering him a place between scales that glittered like frost in moonlight. Climbing onto the dragon's back, Eryndor felt the smooth, cold surface beneath his hands, the silent strength of a creature older than the stars. The dragon shifted, muscles tensing, and with a single powerful beat of his wings, they were airborne, soaring out of the cavern and into the open night. Below, the mountains receded, their dark peaks vanishing as they rose higher and higher until the world was nothing but endless sky and the cool, eternal silence of the stars. As they flew, Eryndor held tight, his heart pounding, his mind overwhelmed by the vastness around him. Here, on the back of a dragon, he felt as though he had slipped from the realm of mortals and into a world where magic was woven into every breath, every distant shimmer of stardust that trailed in their wake. And somewhere in that endless sky, he felt the first stirrings of understanding, a glimpse of the trial he was to face. A journey into the unknown where trust was the only light guiding his path. The night was boundless, stretching out before them as if the sky itself had expanded to make room for the ancient power of the creature Eryndor now rode. On the dragon's back, he felt himself becoming part of the vast starlit expanse, no longer bound by earthly fears or even the weight of his own body. The dragon's wings sliced through the air with rhythmic grace, each beat carrying them further from the realm of mortals and deeper into a midnight kingdom only few dared witness. Ash flew in silence, his powerful form moving effortlessly through the cold, thin air, leaving a shimmering trail of stardust in his wake. Eryndor tightened his grip, feeling the subtle vibrations of each wing beat, the hum of magic coursing through the dragon's scales. The stars around them seemed to dim in the wake of the stardust, as if they too were drawn into the dragon's mysterious orbit. Finally, Ash spoke, his voice a low rumble that resonated through Eryndor's bones. You seek to understand the power that guards your village, to dispel the shadows that creep into your world. Yet shadows do not fear light, nor do they vanish before it. They are drawn to it, feeding on the fears and doubts buried in mortal hearts. Eryndor shivered. He had thought that courage alone would be enough, that his willingness to sacrifice himself would somehow lift the darkness. But Ash's words unveiled a deeper, more complex truth, one that pulsed beneath his understanding like an undercurrent in a deep river. Then, how does one defeat the shadow? He asked, his voice barely more than a whisper. Ash's wings tilted, guiding them into a slow spiral. By facing it, trust and sacrifice are woven into the essence of Stardust. Stardust does not exist to banish shadows, but to hold them, to illuminate their true nature. You cannot wield this magic without offering a part of yourself, a piece that will be given freely, never to return as it was. Eryndor's grip tightened, a chill running through him as he understood. The dragon's magic was not a weapon, not a charm to be cast with ease. To call upon Stardust to hold it, he would have to give of himself, surrender something of his very soul. It was a test of faith in its purest form, a journey not only through the sky, but into the heart of his own spirit. You must give me part of your spirit, Ash continued, his voice soft, yet carrying the weight of eternity. Only then can I breathe upon it, transforming it into stardust that will protect your village. But know this, Eryndor. This sacrifice will bind you to me, for as long as stardust glitters in the night. Eryndor's heart trembled, caught between fear and resolve. He had known that this journey would change him, but he hadn't anticipated that his spirit itself would become the price. Yet he could not deny the truth of Ash's words. The shadow over his village could only be dispelled by facing the fear it thrived upon. He took a breath, steadying himself. If it will save my village, I am willing. Tell me what I must do. Ash's eyes glowed with a fierce, ancient light, and for the first time, Eryndor sensed approval in those fiery depths. You will close your eyes, elf, and surrender the piece of yourself that you hold dearest. This sacrifice is an offering of trust, a gift given without expectation of return. You must let go completely, trusting that what is taken will serve a purpose greater than your own. Eryndor closed his eyes, his mind flickering through memories, moments, fragments of who he was. He thought of his family, his home, the village he had known all his life. He thought of the laughter and love that had shaped him, and a pang of sorrow gripped him as he realized that, to save these things, he would have to let part of them go. A soft, warm glow began to spread within him, a sensation both comforting and sorrowful, as if he were cradling the light of his own spirit in his hands. He focused on that warmth, feeling it pulse with life, with love, with everything that made him who he was. Then, with a single silent prayer, he released it, letting it flow out of him like water. Ash took a deep breath, and Eryndor felt the dragon's powerful lungs expanding beneath him. A soft rumble filled the air as Ash's breath mingled with the warmth of Eryndor's spirit, transforming it into something radiant, ethereal. As he exhaled, Ash breathed stardust into the night, a trail of light stretching across the heavens, shimmering with a silvery glow. The world around them brightened as the stardust hung in the air, a luminous path that curved over the mountains, casting a gentle glow upon the valley below. Eryndor felt lighter, almost hollow, as if he had shed part of himself and left it in the sky. Ash's voice, low and steady, rumbled once more. The darkness will retreat now, held at bay by your gift. But know this, Eryndor. Stardust binds you to me and to the night. You will walk under the same sky, yet see it with new eyes. As they descended, Eryndor felt the weight of his decision settle upon him, mingling with an unnameable peace. He was bound now, tied to the dragon and the sky, to the light he had given away in service of his village. And though he could not yet know the depth of his sacrifice, a quiet certainty filled him as they returned to the earth, that the shadow had been lifted, and in its place a new light would forever grace the midnight sky. Eryndor descended from Ash's back, his legs unsteady as he touched solid ground once more. He felt light, almost weightless, yet there was a strange absence within him, as though a part of his soul had been hollowed out. The warmth that had always been his had shifted, transformed into something luminous and distant, now resting within the stardust scattered across the heavens. Ash loomed above him, his eyes softer now, imbued with a flicker of understanding. You have given a part of yourself to the night, the dragon murmured, his voice a low thunder that echoed in the vast silence. The stardust that we left across the sky will hold the darkness at bay, but only for as long as your spirit endures. Eryndor nodded, feeling the truth of Ash's words settle within him. The weight of his decision, his sacrifice, was as vast and untouchable as the night itself. A soft breeze swept through the mountains, rustling his hair, and he wondered if the wind carried fragments of his own soul, drifting through the world as the stardust sparkled above. Ash watched him, his gaze solemn. The shadow over your village is not simply a curse. It is a reflection of what lies hidden, a dark mirror that feeds upon doubt, division, and fear. The stardust will protect them, but only if they can look within themselves and find the courage to face their fears, to heal what has been broken. Eryndor's heart tightened. The task before his village was daunting, for he knew well the seeds of mistrust that had taken root, the quiet whispers of fear that had spread through his people like a silent poison. But he also knew that his sacrifice, his journey, would mean something, that perhaps in time his people would see the light he had offered them and find the strength to let it guide them. Ash's massive wing shifted, folding elegantly against his sides, and he lowered his head to Eryndor's level, his breath warm and tinged with the scent of ancient fires. The path you have chosen is not without pain, young elf. You are bound to me now, your spirit woven into the stardust that graces the midnight sky. When your people look up, they will see your sacrifice, though they may not understand its cost. Eryndor swallowed, feeling the weight of that bond settle over him. I accepted this path to save them, he said quietly, his voice steady despite the ache in his heart. Even if they never know what was given, I would choose this again. A flicker of pride passed through Ash's eyes, and he inclined his head, his gaze almost gentle. Then, you have learned the true meaning of sacrifice, Eryndor of Eldergrove. To give without expectation, to trust in the light that you cannot see. As they spoke, dawn began to creep along the edges of the mountains, casting faint tendrils of light across the valley. Eryndor's eyes lifted to the fading night, where the stardust still lingered, a trail of silver woven through the sky, delicate as spider silk. He felt his own spirit shimmer there, faint and eternal, a gift that would burn in the heavens long after he was gone. Ash watched the sky as well, his expression inscrutable, and for a moment an unspoken bond passed between them, a shared understanding, as ancient and eternal as the stars themselves. "It is time," Ash murmured, his voice softer now, filled with a strange, quiet sorrow. "Your village awaits you, Eryndor. The shadow has been lifted, but the journey you began is not yet over. Return to them and guide them as you have been guided." Eryndor bowed deeply, a gesture of gratitude and respect for the creature who had taught him more than he could ever have imagined. "Thank you, Ash," he said, his voice a soft echo in the morning light. "I will honor this bond and the light we have created." With a final nod, Ash unfurled his wings, their edges glowing faintly in the dawn. He took to the sky, his form blending seamlessly with the fading night, until he was nothing more than a distant shadow, a memory suspended among the stars. Eryndor watched until Ash vanished from sight, leaving only the lingering stardust that danced across the heavens. The dawn broke fully, spilling light over the mountains, casting warm hues over the valley below. And though Eryndor's heart felt both empty and full, he turned toward his village with a quiet strength. He walked down the mountain, carrying the weight of his sacrifice, his spirit intertwined with the light he had given to the night. He knew that when he returned to Eldergrove, he would see his village with new eyes, eyes that had glimpsed eternity, that understood the delicate balance between light and shadow, trust and fear. As he descended, he realized he could feel the faint pull of the stardust within him, a bond that connected him to the sky above, to the dragon who had given him both a burden and a gift. It was a light he could never hold, yet it burned within him, guiding his steps like a quiet promise, a silent vow to protect those he loved. When he finally reached the valley, the mist that had haunted Eldergrove had begun to lift, its shadows retreating before the light that now graced the village. And as he walked through his home, the villagers looked up, their eyes following his to the trail of stardust that stretched across the dawn sky. In their faces, Eryndor saw a quiet wonder, a hope that had not been there before. They did not know the price he had paid, the part of himself he had given to create that light. But perhaps in time, they would come to understand the power of trust, of sacrifice, and the enduring strength of a single light cast into the darkest of nights. Eldergrove was silent as Eryndor entered the village, his steps light yet steady, guided by an unseen glow that lingered within him. The mist, once thick as smoke, had dissipated, revealing the familiar paths and homes. Yet everything seemed changed, bathed in the soft, diffused light of dawn. The villagers, emerging tentatively from their homes, looked up in wonder, their gazes drawn skyward, where trails of stardust lingered, woven like a delicate web against the brightening horizon. Eryndor could feel their curiosity, their unspoken questions as they gathered around him. But he also sensed a shift, a fragile hope that hovered in the air like the stardust above. They had seen the shadows recede, felt the weight of fear begin to lift, and in their eyes he glimpsed a glimmer of belief, a faith that perhaps their world could be saved from the darkness that had crept in so silently. One of the elders, her voice barely a whisper against the morning's quiet, stepped forward, her gaze resting on Eryndor with an intensity that sent a shiver down his spine. "What have you done, Eryndor? What light have you brought upon us?" Eryndor hesitated, feeling the weight of his journey settle within him. The words were difficult to summon, for how could he explain the depths of his sacrifice, the bond he had forged with the dragon whose breath now graced the sky? Yet in their eyes, he saw not only curiosity but a yearning for truth. "I journeyed into the mountains," he began slowly, his voice soft yet unwavering. "I found Ash, the dragon of midnight, and I offered him a part of my spirit, a light that he breathed into the sky to hold back the shadows." The villagers murmured, their expressions a mixture of awe and confusion. Some looked to the heavens, tracing the trails of stardust with their eyes, while others gazed at him with newfound respect, an understanding dawning within them as they began to grasp the gravity of his sacrifice. One child, small and wide-eyed, reached up, her tiny hand pointing at the sky. "Will the stardust keep us safe, Eryndor?" she asked, her voice filled with innocent wonder. Eryndor knelt to meet her gaze, a gentle smile softening his features. "Yes," he said, the word resonant with a quiet certainty. "The stardust will watch over you, but it is also a reminder that shadows are not vanquished by fear, but by the light we carry within us." The elders exchanged glances, a quiet murmur passing through them. They understood, in a way that only time and wisdom could teach, that Eryndor's words held more than a simple answer. They held a challenge, a call to rise above the doubt and mistrust that had lingered in their hearts. As the day wore on, Eryndor felt the stardust within him begin to settle, the bond between himself and Ash pulsing like a steady heartbeat. Each time he looked up at the shimmering trails in the sky, he felt the echo of that midnight flight, the sensation of soaring into an unknown sky with nothing but trust to guide him. It was a light he carried within himself now, a gift that bound him to the world in a way he had never anticipated. The villagers went about their day with renewed energy, tending to the fields and mending what the shadow had touched. Yet their eyes often drifted to the heavens, where the stardust lingered like a silent guardian. Eryndor watched them, a quiet pride swelling within him, as he saw how his sacrifice had sparked something within their hearts, a willingness to look beyond fear, to trust in a light that could not always be seen. As the sun set and dusk once again blanketed Eldergrove, Eryndor stood at the edge of the village, his gaze fixed upon the distant mountains where he had first glimpsed Ash. He could feel the faint pull of the dragon's spirit, a reminder that he was no longer entirely of this world. His sacrifice had bound him to the night, to the realm of stardust and shadows, and he knew that his path would forever be intertwined with Ash's. Yet, as the stars began to pierce the twilight, he felt no regret. He had found something greater than himself, a truth woven into the very fabric of the sky, a reminder that light and darkness were but two halves of a whole. One of the elders approached, her face soft in the fading light. She reached out, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. "You have given us hope, Eryndor. The shadows may come again, but we now carry a part of your light within us. We will not forget." Eryndor nodded, a warmth spreading through him. He did not know what the future held, nor how long the stardust would linger in the skies. But he knew, with a quiet certainty, that his village would endure, that they would look to the heavens and remember the sacrifice that had woven their fates together. And as the first trails of stardust began to shimmer anew, marking Ash's midnight flight across the heavens, Eryndor lifted his gaze, feeling a gentle peace settle over him. He was part of that light now, his spirit forever bound to the stars, a silent guardian watching over his village from above. The night unfolded in silence, but within that silence was a promise, an unspoken vow that Eryndor knew would endure long after he was gone. The stardust danced across the sky, a luminous thread connecting him to a world beyond sight. A light cast into the darkness, guiding those who would dare to follow. And somewhere, in the boundless night, Ash flew, leaving trails of stardust that whispered of sacrifice, of trust, and the quiet, enduring strength of a single heart bound to the stars.